Get your reaction to the Minister's medium-term budget. Joining us tonight to reflect on this speech, we're joined by Political Economist Daniel Silke, SMME Forum President Tebogo Khaas, and Youth Capital's Network Mobiliser Lethiwe Nkosi. Good evening to all of you, and thank you so much for your time. More broadly, it doesn't look like there were any big surprises coming out of this medium-term budget policy statement. But Daniel, let me perhaps kick it off with you and give us a sense of what you effectively take away from this afternoon's address.
Thank you, Kathy. I didn't take away that much, to be perfectly honest. I think the Minister kicked the can down the road to the main budget at the end of February. It did look to me as though government was very unsure on a variety of issues, the broad policy front issues of social redress, the basic income grant, the issues relating to revenue collection and how sustainable that is. And of course, additional expenses when it came to Eskom and the various other SOEs. These, have been with us before. They were there today. They're going to be with us probably next year. And I think there was just too much uncertainty sort of really injected into this budget to make any good analysis of it, except to say that, it was the Minister's first budget. It showed, I think, some continuity from the previous Minister of Finance. I think here is someone who's an ANC insider, who I think has his head screwed on correctly when it comes to understanding the challenges of the policy paralysis that we have in South Africa and the effects on growth. But beyond that, I think that there was little to suggest that government has a grip on the vexed issue of growing the economy firstly, and obviously the issue of job creation, which in my mind is still the critical issue for us.
Tebogo, let me come to you. What's your reaction?
Daniel couldn't have summarized it or captured it very aptly. In fact, you would, even if you close your eyes and maybe they even made the voice constant, you'd probably think it was Tito Mboweni or any other minister that spoke before. There was nothing really materially different from this midterm budget policy statement. It was just a repetition of what we had in past statements, be they budget statements or midterm statements, with a sprinkling of this and other different wording here and there. But otherwise, for all intents and purposes, for us, it is very disappointing, to say the least.
Lethiwe, of course, you are listening out for the interests of young people in this country. Anything that came out for you that suggested that we will be on a different trajectory that changes perhaps the lived experience and the outcomes that young people are currently subjected to?
Thank you so much, Kathy. I think I want to pick up on what Daniel said about the absence of the mention of job creation. As Youth Capital, we feel like there was not a strong emphasis on youth unemployment and how that crisis of youth unemployment will be tackled. We do commend the Minister's mention of the commitment towards public employment, but we believe that there's still so much work that needs to be done in relation to public employment programs and how they are rolled out. And so we are eager to see how that commitment, the amount that has been allocated to public employment, will really be spent to ensure that public employment opportunities are meaningful for young people. We also heard him speak a lot about economic growth and the need for South Africa to be well positioned to attract investors. But as Youth Capital, we feel as though economic growth without unlocking young people's potential is almost in vain. It's counterintuitive because opportunities or job opportunities may be created through our economy growing, but if young people's potential is not unlocked, for instance, if we don't address how much money young people spend to look for work, if we don't address the issue around skills development, then the opportunities that will be created through economic growth will not address the crisis of youth unemployment.
Daniel, the finance minister spoke a lot about the need to unlock the policy framework in this country so that economic growth can be ignited and to basically make it easy for business to do business in South Africa. But beyond that, do you find that there's anything that he has mentioned that will set South Africa on a different growth trajectory than what we have been on?
The short answer is no, but I think that the policy framework that we're currently in is not really the domain of the finance minister, or frankly the domain of Treasury, although there perhaps hints as to what they would like. The policy domain at the moment is, at the behest of cabinet and the broader ANC. And unless you have an ANC that really understands a modern economy, what it takes to be competitive, and I absolutely agree with my co-speaker on the issue of skills development and using reskilling in particular to try and move ourselves into a modern framework, unless you apply that in policy, and I might add, and I know it's more controversial, but unless you actually really open your arms to cooperation with the private sector. I must just say that the minister did stress this issue of private sector involvement, which is critical, also for skills development as well, I might add. But I just don't feel as though there's enough cohesiveness within the ANC from an economic policy point of view to really present, a set of really 10 great principles, or even 3 great principles that are likely to absorb, our 9 million young people in this country who are out of work. So to me, the buck stops with the politicians, and the buck stops in the ANC policy room, and what that ANC policy room and what the broad alliance can really grapple with in terms of compromising on past ideologies and perhaps merging them or morphing them into something more modern and market-friendly, dare I say.
Something that the minister sounded quite upbeat about was the fact that government will now be spending more than it ever has when it comes to educating the young people of the country. Tebogo Khaas, let me bring you in here and talk about what you think the impact of that is going to be. Already in this financial year, spending on higher education has increased to about 46 billion, and that's expected to hit 50 billion over the next 3 years.
You see, I have a problem with those type of narrative and even numbers, because all that it seeks to do is to look at tertiary education. And when you talk about tertiary education, you talk about universities. And most of the times people come out of university with soft skills and not skills that are actually attuned to the demands of the economy. Whereas a focus ought to be more on the technical skills, the vocational skills that will prepare the budding entrepreneurs or the young people for the marketplace, which is not the case currently. And that is why you even find that there's an output of many graduates from university who end up not being absorbed by the economy, and they end up being unemployed, which is also an embarrassment in its own. But most importantly also, I think government was also coy to admit, in fact it was a mere culpa of sorts, to say we failed small businesses by the now defunct loan guarantee scheme, which was meant to help small businesses weather the storms or the hardships that came after the pandemic hit these shores. So to talk about numbers of investments, we know that, and so what if you pump more money into universities or for bursaries or NSFAS or whatever it is? It is the economy and that is driven by small business entrepreneurs that ought to be at the forefront of any investments by government if we're going to talk about structural adjustments of the economy.
So, Tebogo, are you saying that the nature of investment that government is making then into skilling the young people of the country, because in many ways you talk about tertiary institutions, but we know that a significant portion of that budget also ends up with FET colleges that by and large are highly subsidized by government as well. Are you saying that whatever skills, whatever money or resources that government is spending on skilling young people is not actually resulting in those skills being efficient for the marketplace?
Absolutely. In fact, let me just illustrate the point. If you take, for example, the Presidential Infrastructure Coordination Commission, they've got shovel-ready projects that were passed or gazetted, I think 12 months or at least 12 months ago. You'd know that in a year or 2 or 3, you're going to need this type of skill set. Let us take the digitization project, for example. You'd know that you're going to need people who will be able to assist government to digitize the records into, to take the manual records into digital form. Therefore, you're going to look into the market and say, what skill set do we need? Is the skill set available in the market? If not, then you encourage students to take up courses or training or internship that will prepare them for such opportunities as they become open. When you're going to be rolling out a 5 billion or 7 billion project in that regard, then surely you'll have people who will then be able to drive those projects. You've got the young skills who will then be able to be up or to be taken up, to fulfill the opportunities that will be ready for them to take. That is the kind of disconnect that we currently see happening, where you don't find that government, it knows that we're going to be hosting the World Cup in 10 years' time. We're going to need to build stadium. We need fitters, welders, and all that. Nothing has been done to prepare them today for the jobs of tomorrow.
All right, so we're going to continue our conversation, get reaction from our guests tonight on the medium-term budget policy statement. We'll also take a look at SOEs. The finance minister says they can expect tough love. What exactly does that mean practically? We'll continue our discussion after this. You love News at Prime. Thanks for staying with us tonight. We continue getting reaction to Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana's maiden medium-term budget policy statement. Political Economist Daniel Silke, President of the SMME Forum, Tebogo Khaas, and Youth Capital's Network Mobiliser, Lethiwe Nkosi, joining us for this conversation. So Lethiwe, let me bring you in here and perhaps get a chance for you to reflect then on this issue of increased spending for educating South Africa's young people.
Thank you so much. I think as much as it is important for there to be investment in the tertiary education space, equally important investment must be made towards basic education. As Youth Capital, we find that a lot of young people experience a lot of barriers, a lot of roadblocks whilst they are in high school, to the extent that they don't even make it to matric and get the certificate they need to pursue a tertiary education, to go to an FET, a TVET. And so we shouldn't just look at the investment necessary for tertiary education, but also not neglect basic education to make sure that young people actually do make it, over the period of 12 years, or if they decide to leave school at grade 9, they leave school with a certificate that holds weight and allows them to go to a technical college and acquire the technical skills that our economy requires. So I applaud the investment in tertiary education, but more work needs to be done as well in basic education.
Daniel, I want to go back to a statement that you made earlier, and it was really about kicking the can further down the road. One very much got the sense of that when it came to the country's SOEs. We've certainly had a lot more specific statements made about the country's SOEs in previous budget statements. Today, the minister saying, well, we're not going to be giving them any additional support. Is that a position that government can really afford when we still don't have a clear idea of what the turnaround plan for SOEs is? And that's just based on the fact that the last time Finance Minister Tito Mboweni had alluded to the fact that some SOEs would need to be shut down, but we haven't seen any practical steps to actually doing that.
Now, Kathy, you're right. It was a bit confusing, I must admit, on the issue of SOEs. However, having said that, if you analyze, the speech itself, Minister Godongwana did make reference to the fact that, there are some SOEs that we need, and possibly, just like Minister Mboweni did in previous days, government needs to reflect on what's essential. So there was a type of admission that some of the SOEs really perhaps should not be under government control, which really reflects continuity with Tito Mboweni of last year and previous years. And I think we have seen some continuity come forward in the sense that by not propping up SOEs once again, or at least indicating this tough love approach, that is continuity from the Mboweni era. It sends a message certainly to the SOEs that they've got to conduct their own accounting and financing in a much more responsible fashion. But ultimately, when push comes to shove, government is going to have to decide what it believes it needs to hold on to and what it believes it can relinquish control over. I'm certainly of the view that the government should relinquish control over all sorts of these SOEs that really haven't performed well under state management. But in the interim, the issue is funding, yes, but it's also the management. And we've seen for the last 2 days how the management and procurement issues in particular at Eskom have been dissected, and the disaster that has been in, and it's cost this country millions, and has cost the poor and the youth millions as well, as the minister made out. So look, I think he was fair. I have to admit, I think he was fair on the issue of SOEs. There's not much flesh to the bones of detail here as what government wants to do, but it goes back to my original point. I don't think that government really knows what it wants to do, and I don't think it really actually has the full buy-in from all its component elements on what to keep, what not to keep, what to partially privatize, what not to privatize. It's a confusing message coming out of the state, and in a sense that was related back to what was a relatively short and light speech this afternoon.
Daniel, the point that you're making, I think, brings me to the idea that ultimately you have this ongoing stalemate, but the stalemate is not without consequences. The lack of clear direction has consequences for the workers of these SOEs. Danal is a clear example of a state-owned company that has been knocking at government's door, asking for a bailout. There seems to be no clear idea of, what the future of Danal is. They're moving from month to month, sometimes with salaries, sometimes without salaries. And one has to think about the consequences of that for the employees of an institution or organization, rather, like Danal. So this indecision is not without consequence. And like you're saying, it's been on the cards for a long time now. Surely, is it unreasonable to expect that there has to be some form of clear policy direction by now?
Kathy, I'm going to get old repeating these points year after year. Yes, you're 100% correct. Policy paralysis has been at the heart of the many, many negative issues about our broader economy and social fabric, I might add, in South Africa for many years. And until such a time as government comes with a cohesive policy where it has buy-in from all its component elements. Remember, the ANC today is still a very divided organization in terms of its alliance partners. It's a tense organization. It's got all sorts of leadership issues and personality clashes. You've really got to come with a proper, concerted, full buy-in, enthusiastically so. Even on the issue of the Green Deal, for that matter, on energy. It's got to be embraced. It's got to be embraced by the ANC. It's got to be embraced by the Minister of Mineral and Energy Affairs, I might add, before it can be implemented properly. So this lack of cohesiveness, I think, from the political core is at the heart of these issues. And that's why we've had such a sluggish policy implementation, almost piecemeal policy implementation. It hasn't helped anybody. It hasn't helped our youth. It hasn't helped the unemployed. And it leaves us sort of in a no man's land, in a kind of limbo. And that's what I felt today. It was kind of a limbo mini budget.
Tebogo, let me get final remarks from you then on the way forward. What does today's budget mean for small and medium entrepreneurs who are part of your organization that you represent tonight? Any sense of where to from here on?
If you may indulge me, just for somebody who's just tuned in, by SOEs, we're talking about the dirt horses that CEO of energy company Eskom was talking about them, am I right? And all these dead horses are the ones who seem to be attracting all the money that should be targeted to helping small businesses sustain themselves and be able to contribute sustainably to the economy. Having said that, I still believe that government, as Daniel rightly put it, kick the can down the road and see what happens next year. But that should stop. Government needs to engage industry. Government needs to lobby not within its echo chambers. It needs to go outside its comfort zone and be able to talk to people who are out there who do the job on a daily basis to understand what it is that is required and be more responsive to the needs of society, the needs of the small business ecosystem, which is not currently the case. And I think maybe let's hope that Minister Godongwana will use this opportunity between today and the next budget speech next year to reflect and consult widely and understand what needs to be dropped in terms of how government has been working and what needs to be introduced. And also, the Small Business Development Ministry itself needs to also be nimble-footed. It needs to also stop moving away from echo chambers that it seems to be operating in and make sure that it engages deeply with society and without making it a political animal.
All right. Lethiwe, I'll give you the final word tonight.
Thank you. I share the sentiment that Tebogo just shared about, consulting everyone and making sure that the views and needs of every South African are taken into consideration as the minister prepares for the budget speech that he'll deliver next year. And on that note, at Youth Capital, we firmly believe that young people's voices need to be heard. When we speak about youth unemployment, we cannot do it in the absence of young people. And by that, we don't just mean, simple consultations where young people are asked to give input without meaningfully hearing what young people have to say. So when young people gather, we encourage our leaders to be present, even allow themselves to show up in spaces young people have created, so as to hear what young people have to say, so that next year we don't find ourselves in a position where the issue of youth unemployment is not well articulated in the budget as we've seen in today's budget. Thank you so much.
All right, let's leave it there for tonight. Thank you all for your time. Lethiwe Nkosi, Tebogo Khaas, and Daniel Silke.